Hi, my name is Vicki Nasman, and I am the co-president with my husband Steve Nasman of the Orange County Torero Club. I'm thrilled that you've joined us today for this important program offered by the Alumni Association at the University of San Diego, standing out in the 2024 job market. The Alumni Association's mission is to engage and enrich the Torero community for life and by providing meaningful opportunities such as today's connection. We hope that you continue to grow in your relationship with our alma mater, especially this year, because it's the 75th anniversary, and actually it's my 50th reunion year. It's now my pleasure to introduce our newest member of the USD family, Senior Director of Alumni Relations, Eric Hafner. Eric joined the USD team in January of this year and is already making an impact at Alcala Park. He comes to us most recently from his own alma mater, Indiana University, where he worked to engage IU's 750,000 plus graduates. Eric, I invite you to turn on your camera. Welcome. We're happy to have you with us today to facilitate this program.
Thank you, Vicki. I appreciate that. And thanks to Steve. We appreciate your leadership in the Orange County Club. You're true toreros, and all of us at the University of San Diego are very grateful for you and your service. Thank you so much. To everyone watching and to those of you who are joining our recording at some point in the near future, we thank you. I thank you also for welcoming me into the USD community. I'm thrilled to be a part of the Torero family and look forward to connecting with you all very soon. Before I introduce our featured speaker, a few quick housekeeping items. We're using Zoom webinar today and have activated the Q&A feature. Please share your questions throughout the session, and we'll be sure to save time toward the end of the hour to address as many of those questions as possible. The session is being recorded and will be available on the Alumni Association's YouTube channel a bit later this week, or next week perhaps. Closed captions have been activated for those who may find that helpful. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chloe Bachner. Chloe Bachner is an OC native and graduated with her bachelor's and master's in accounting from USD in 2015. Chloe started her career in accounting and pivoted to recruitment 3 years ago. She's now with a boutique search firm, Alliance Resource Group, where she partners with companies throughout Southern California to find the top accounting and finance talent. She wanted to share with the USD alumni community the nuances of recruiting, how to land your next role. Chloe, please activate your camera. Welcome to our program, and thank you so much for offering this opportunity to our alumni.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here.
Lovely. I'm really excited to get into these questions. Thank you again so much for joining us. With that, let's dive in. Let's start with maybe some easier questions. Hopefully they're easier questions, right? What would you say, based on some of your experiences, are the top 2024 recruiting trends?
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited to kind of dive into these trends. Before I do, I think in order to understand the 2024 recruiting trends, you need to understand the job market, right? So last week, the Labor Department came out with the job report for February. There are about 275,000 jobs added. Unemployment did rise slightly to about 3.9%. So it's going up a little bit. It's back the numbers we saw pre-pandemic in 2019. The other thing that came out this week was that the Federal Reserve did say inflation did uptick. So it's a little bit over 3%, which is what they were not expecting. So we'll probably see interest rates hold. That does affect the job market. That being said, right now, it is a resilient job market. It is pretty outstanding to see, despite these high interest rates, how strong everything is. And on top of it, we're seeing that salary increases are actually outpacing inflation. We saw that throughout 23, and we're going to see that hopefully throughout 2024. Overall, we feel really positive about the job market, but it's just something to watch out for. So now that we kind of understand the job market, it's a pretty good one. Let's kind of dive into the recruiting trends. Surprisingly not return to office is still a discussion 4 years post-pandemic. And I do want to discuss this because it's something I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Most industries at this point are going to work on a hybrid schedule. I would say more often than not than in Southern California, we see about 3 to 4 days a week in office. However, a lot of people still want remote. And unfortunately, we are not seeing remote jobs anymore. those jobs that are remote are ultra competitive. Most people who are in those seats, they don't want to give them up. So when they, even if they did want to find a new job, they're unable to do so from a fully remote perspective. And the candidates or jobs that are looking for a fully remote job, like I mentioned, they're ultra competitive. The people who end up with those positions are at the top of their class within their industry. And they also, too, you're competing with people not only in California, New York, Florida, and a lot of times companies are incentivized to hire somebody in a lower cost of living state, unlike California. So something to keep in mind. And more importantly, too, that I do want to bring up when you're thinking about career trajectory, they're now doing more and more studies that if you are working fully remote, you're more than likely to be passed up for promotions. So, when you're going through your job search, keep that in the back of your mind, depending on what your job is. If you are looking to continue to grow within your profession, it's something to consider in terms of finding something that's local to your area or that's on a hybrid basis, because you will get more training, you will get more feedback, you'll get more ad hoc projects that'll help you continue to grow in your career. And then number 2 that we're seeing is there's an increase in job hopping now that Gen Z and millennials are dominating the workforce. And on top of that, there is a decline of employee loyalty and engagement. And I'd like to read just like a brief study based off of Robert Half, which is a national recruiting agency. They said that 74% of 18 to 26-year-olds and about 62% of 27 to 42-year-olds are actually looking for a job right now or intend to in the next 6 months. And we're going to be seeing this more and more. I do think that there should be a caveat, though, with this. Even though job hopping is becoming more of a trend, still most employers are always cognizant of job hopping and they're always wary of candidates. So if you are looking for a new job, make sure it's strategic and making sure that you're not job hopping every 2 years, because that is a red flag to most employers. And then the last trend I want to discuss for 2024 is ghosting. So most millennials and Gen Z know what ghosting is, but if we have any Gen X or baby boomers on the call, ghosting is when you simply stop all communication. And this is a big issue in recruiting, both on the candidate side and on the employer side. I would say employers are a little bit more guilty of ghosting nowadays than candidates are. But it is something that's an issue. Ghosting can happen for a multitude of reasons. One of which is because employers are afraid if they give feedback to a candidate about why they're not going to be hired, they're going to be sued. So that's one thing, unfortunate as it is, but that's kind of the situation. Another thing to discuss is that sometimes employers really like you and they're their second choice. And so they want to see if their first candidate will accept rather than getting back to you on an answer. So they'll hold out as much as they can to see if, maybe they'll hire you instead. And then third, there is just so much chaos that happens in the hiring world. There's so much volume of people depending on your industry that hiring managers simply forget to. And I'm not saying that's right by any means, but it's kind of the reality of the situation. And then on the candidate side, candidates sometimes will stop talking to employers who are interested in them if they get a job offer, or if for whatever reason they just don't think it's a fit. So I think collectively as a society, we need to be more cognizant of this and make sure that we're open communication on both sides, because it is an issue right now in 2024 with the recruiting.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point there. I've certainly been on the side of a job search, right, where I am just always so anxious and so ready to hear back from someone. And it just feels like ages, and usually it's just a couple days, right?
Yeah.
But I'm wondering what advice you might have for those who might experience that, right? Like what is a good time frame, and what might that follow-up look like for someone who's really hoping to land a job with a company?
Yeah, so I would say in general, I would give companies a couple days to get back to you, or ask about expectations when you're in that interview process on when you expect to hear back. Because sometimes you're a candidate, sometimes you could just be the first person that they talk to. And so in some cases, that's actually a detriment to you if they like you, because they want to see what else is out there sometimes I'll have employers who they'll meet one person, they love them and they'll give them the job, but more often employers want to talk to a couple of people. So if you're in a really niche market where there's not a lot of candidates like you, it might take a while. In general, I would say within a week, they should get back to you. What you do if you don't hear follow up is follow up. Simply, send an email. If you don't hear anything within a day or two, maybe call. If you still don't hear anything, I would assume that they're moving in another direction. I would say if you don't hear anything within 2 weeks, especially, just assume that they're not going to be moving forward. As harsh as that is, it's the reality in most cases.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice. So I know a lot of our alum want to know, what is the best way to find a job or a company to target? Is there a specific way to stand out in the crowded online world when so many employers seem to be getting so many applications for one specific job?
So great question. And I'm glad we're going to be talking about this because the majority of alumni, like you said, did bring this up ahead of time. I think that you really need to widen your strategy, and we'll talk about that. First and foremost, I like to say to candidates, you need to be the CEO of your job search process. No one is going to be your advocate better than yourself. And you have to be the pilot. You have to make sure that you're getting follow-ups that you're looking for and be proactive. You can't lean on too many people. And those that you lean on, you need to hold accountable. So I wanted to bring that up. Number two, it is important to partner with external recruiters like myself. So as external recruiters, there's a multitude of things that we can bring to the table. One of which is oftentimes my clients will call me and say, hey, Chloe, I need this accountant. Can you help me? And it will never go on LinkedIn. It will never go on a job ad. And so that's really important because recruiters, we know our clients, what's going on with them. Is there a major transaction that they need more people with? And on top of that, we know in general, how companies are doing, how people, if they're going to be looking to grow a certain profile in the future. We also have, contacts at the companies where, maybe they're not ready to hire, but if you come to me and you say, hey, Chloe, I'm really looking for this role with a medical device company. I've got 5 med device companies I can call up in an instant, and I can send your resume directly over to the hiring manager rather than having to go through HR. So you bypass a lot of the requirements. I know that some people are reticent to talk to recruiters because, let's be honest, recruiting in general can have a really bad rap, and there's a reason for it. So I hear horror stories on a daily basis about other recruiters. So I know my industry does not have the best feelings in the marketplace. Now there are plenty of recruiters that are transactional, right? But you want to find the ones that are relationship based and are in it for the long haul and want to be with you throughout your career. And you just, unfortunately, sometimes depending on your industry, need to talk to a lot of recruiters. So keep doing it. I know it can be frustrating, but you'll find a good recruiter, and I'm telling you, it will pay off. Third and foremost, you need to leverage your network. Recruiting, even in today's age, even though it's mostly, an online society in terms of finding people, it is about who you know. So with your network, reach out to former coworkers. They're often great sources of finding new jobs. And they also get referral bonuses that can be very lucrative if you end up joining their team. So make sure to, keep in touch with people when they leave, because you never know what's going to happen and they could call you. And again, you'll bypass a lot of the recruiting headache if somebody refers you in for a role. The other thing too, depending on your industry, are there conferences that are coming up? Are there continuing education courses that you can take? And a lot of times the companies that you're most interested in will be there. So make sure to see who's attending, and make sure if you go to those events that you know who you want to talk to and be strategic about it, right? That's a great way to put yourself in there. And the more face-to-face interaction, the more it's going to help you with that job search or even give you potential job leads. So that's a really crucial one. And then LinkedIn is also a network too, right? Even if you're not comfortable in those social situations, make sure that your LinkedIn profile is up to date. And you can turn open to work on LinkedIn. And I think that's crucial. A lot of candidates are wary about the LinkedIn open to work functionality if you're currently employed. There is a setting within LinkedIn where you can say, I only want it to be open to recruiters so that way nobody in your current employer can see that. So I do recommend that for people who are actively looking or want to kind of see what's out there. And then you can put detailed, okay, I want this geographic area, hybrid or on-site, details possible. And then number 3, don't be sorry, 1 second. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, my Zoom was not happy. So, and then one thing I wanted to discuss is don't be afraid to reach out to hiring managers directly. So if you're on LinkedIn, you see a company job ad and it says who the hiring manager is, send them a note. Reach out to them, say, hey, I'm very interested. So many people who apply to my job postings don't ever reach out to me directly. And often, and there's some really good candidates that come through the job ad. So don't be afraid to reach out to them. And if they say, I really, thank you, but you don't have the skill set, that is the perfect opportunity to ask them, do you mind giving me feedback? Do I need to go back to school and get a specific certification? Do I need to get a certain job in between this potential future role so that I could potentially work for your company? And people overall want to help you. You just have to ask for the feedback. So don't be afraid to do so. In my prior career as an accountant, when I left the Big Four and I wanted to go to another firm, while I was still at the Big Four, I actually called partners at other firms and said, hey, I'm not happy here. Do you have anything? And I got multiple job offers from me directly calling the hiring managers. So don't be afraid to do it. It's a good thing. And then one question that came up from the USD alumni community was, how important is LinkedIn in your search? And I cannot stress enough, it is still the #1 recruitment tool. I highly recommend it because you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities that are present on LinkedIn or maybe aren't even present. Kind of going back to the thing that I mentioned before, where a lot of clients just come to me, they don't post anything. I will be reaching out to people on LinkedIn. That is still the #1 place where I find and source qualified candidates for. And, you don't know what people are out, you don't know what's out there unless you're active on LinkedIn. So make sure you have an updated professional photo, make sure your education, your career is on there, and make sure you're checking it. That's also a big thing. It's not enough people check it. So set notifications on your phone or just make it a practice. Maybe Fridays at 10 a.m. I'm going to go in and see if I have any messages because things do move pretty quick from the recruiting standpoint. And I know a lot of people tend to rely on job postings as their #1 source. I would tell you in recruitment, it's just kind of like investment strategy. You want to diversify, right? So going back, don't just solely apply to job ads because a lot of job applications, unfortunately too, they can get kind of lost in the LinkedIn or HR online application process. And there's a multitude of reasons for it. You do still want to apply to job ads because there is some success rate with it. However, it's very minimal, right? So keep that in your tool chest, but don't solely rely on that. Which brings me up to another question that came up repeatedly for the people who asked questions ahead of time was they feel like they're just applying all the time. They're getting no traction, kind of what's going on. And there's a conception that AI is screening out all these candidates and, tossing them out. The thing to realize is that a lot of times on these job ads, we have filters. So for a lot of my job ads that I post, I will say, because I'm an accounting recruiter, it's a little more specific. I will say, do you have a bachelor's degree in accounting? That's almost always a requirement. Another thing for my clients is most of them cannot sponsor work visas. So I always say, do you need a work visa? And if they check either of the boxes on those, it will automatically be filtered and they'll get a rejection email within a couple days. So that does happen almost with every company and every LinkedIn post. So if you're not reading through the specific requirements of the job very carefully, you could be auto-filtered out. Once you go through those initial auto filters, most times your resume is getting to the hiring manager or to the internal recruiter or HR. That being said, depending on the industry, sometimes the HR or internal recruiters, they're fantastic at that industry specific role. But if it's a role that's supporting that industry, they may not know the skill sets. So for example, I'll go back to that med device company that I'm working with. Their internal recruiter is fantastic. She's really good at hiring biochemists and engineers, but she doesn't know what a great accounting or finance professional looks like, right? So she initially said, Chloe, this person doesn't have med device on their resume. Like, I don't think that this would be a great person. But I ended up having lunch with the CFO and they said, no, this person's fantastic. And that person ended up getting hired because I met with the hiring manager. So again, it's just, there's a lot of different reasons about why your resume might be coming through, but that's why you kind of leverage and make sure that you're hitting all those different variables when you're using your job search rather than just the job application in that process. Any questions for me, Eric? I do have a couple more comments, but wanted to make sure I'm not giving too much information.
Yeah, no, I think that's all really helpful, right? I mean, taking control of your search, utilizing your networks, utilizing resources that are available to you. At the same time, I mean, sometimes there can just be an overwhelming mountain of information, right? Do you have any, quick tips on how people might sort through some of that information or how they might approach finding a recruiter that would work well for them?
Yeah, so great question. In terms of finding a recruiter that's going to work great for you, ask your colleagues, right? Somebody in your industry, have you utilized a recruiter? If so, do you mind giving me your names? I get a lot of referrals from candidates that I've placed, and I love it because we've already got a connection. I most often know what they've worked on because they came from the same company that I pulled that person out of. And then also too, when you turn open to work on, most likely the recruiter in your industry will get notified when you turn that open to work on. So I have different projects and folders. So when certain people I've been really wanting to reach out to turn open to work on, I can just give them that call immediately. So I think that's a great way to find that. But in terms of sifting through the information, there's so many different things, but I would think about too, I'll go into a different industry. Let's just say you're in construction. What are the top construction companies in your area? And then start doing research. Who is in that position now? How did they get there? Reach out to that person on LinkedIn. They most often have their company contact information too. Don't be afraid to send them an email or give them a call. People appreciate when you reach out and if you have a genuine interest in bettering yourself and maybe even hiring them, because across all industries, there is a talent issue and retention. So it's not just accounting and finance, it's everywhere.
Super helpful. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Before we move on, you said you might have another couple of things to add to that last question. Yeah.
So a lot of alumni were asking about resume formatting, and we could have a whole separate webinar on resume formatting and what to do and what not to do. I do want to say this because I don't think enough people know about this at USD. If you're an alumni, you still have full access to USD's Career Center, and they can help you with resume formatting and job interview prep, all of that. So that is a free resource to you. You pay tuition for USD, so make sure you utilize it. They are fantastic. I have worked with them. But in terms of what I can say about resumes, I've seen an uptick recently in colored resumes and 2-column resumes and trying to be unique and stand out. My biggest advice to you is just keep it simple, concise, black and white resume. Make sure you have all your contact information. Believe it or not, sometimes people forget to put their email or their cell, and I'd love to talk to them, but I can't. And then the other thing too is what's really crucial is for your different positions. Make sure obviously what were your deliverables, what were you responsible for in those different roles, but where more importantly did you provide value to the company? And again, I'm an accounting and finance recruiter, so this is an accounting example, but if you're an accountant and you save the company $500,000 because you found that they were double recording an expense, or if you're a finance professional and you increased revenue by X because you found out that a product wasn't cost appropriately, things like that. So obviously you need to think about what value did you add in your industry specifically, but things to just kind of keep in mind when you're writing your resume. Another great question that came up, and I have seen this, especially post-pandemic, is people are asking about like large career gaps. And my biggest advice is be open and honest about them. Don't hide them in your resume. Let's just say you've got a gap from 2014 to 2017, and there's nothing in between the two career blurbs. People a lot of times think it's untrustworthy is the best way to describe it, and they may just toss your resume. I've seen that happen plenty of times. So make sure you put that in there. Did you have children and decided to have an extended parental leave? Put parental leave from 2014 to 2017. I've also had a lot of people who unfortunately have lost family members during the pandemic, or maybe their spouse has cancer and they needed to take time off. Put caring for spouse who was, you could put sick spouse had to take time off from X. It does really help, and employers are more likely to hop on a call with you after that.
That's a great tip. And I would say, in my times in the past as a hiring manager, going back to your thoughts about those resumes, if I'm looking at a lot of resumes, I want to be able to look pretty quickly and read through those. And while I love a colorful resume, or I love one that has been designed a little bit differently, that does catch my eye, I find that sometimes it just becomes too busy and it becomes really difficult to parse through the information that I'm looking for. So, I think some flourish is good, but make sure that you don't lose out on your content, right? For the design that you might take up. Just some of my own personal thoughts there.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are all super helpful tips. Okay, so we've kind of taken control of our search. We are applying, and we got the interview. So we get that invitation. What recommendations do you have to prepare for that interview? And are there certain questions that you anticipate that hiring managers may ask?
All great questions from the audience today. Before we go into that, Eric, and do like a deep dive on that, I do want to preface to everybody here in the USD community, if you do get an interview with a company, think about, is this job going to put me in the right career direction that I'm looking for? Is it going to help me get to the next level? Is this what I've been looking for? And make sure that you think about that before accepting an interview. Oftentimes you already know that because that's why you apply to the company, or that's why you ask the recruiter to send you to the hiring manager. But I've seen a lot of people where they're so unhappy in their current role that they jump to a quick decision, get an interview, get an offer, and accept it without thinking clearly through it. And then that causes issues. So, but that's really where preparing for the interview really comes into play. So what I want to talk about first is the most common feedback I get from hiring managers is that they feel like candidates aren't prepared for the interview and that they didn't ask questions. So my number one rule of interviewing is always ask questions. I don't want to say there's never too many questions to ask, but it shows that you're engaged, you're interested, and more importantly, you did your homework on the company. So go through the company website. Is there information you can glean about their products and services? Is there any questions that you have about how they operate as a business from from going onto their company website? Also check out LinkedIn. A lot of times they'll publish articles about cool things that they're doing, news reports. So make sure you're doing, Google, you can find different things about what's going on in the company too. So make sure you look at that ahead of time. You'll also always be given a list of who you're going to be meeting with during the interview. If you're not given that, you need to ask for it before you go in because you need to be prepared. So look up everybody who you're meeting with on LinkedIn, look at the company bios, and also too, can you make any connections with them? Are they a fellow Torero? Are they passionate about the same volunteer organizations, or maybe are you a part of the same organization, or you go to the same church? Try to make as many connections as you can with that hiring manager because it makes it easier to interview, and it also just creates a little bit better rapport and honestly a little more trust in that initial phase. Because in an interview, as much as the company is interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. So you want to make sure it's a fit from both perspectives. So that's why it's important. It can also give you insight too as to, how long have people been at the company? What was their growth within that team that you may be applying for? So things to think about too and ask during the interview phase. Another thing that you can almost guarantee to always be asked is, why do you want to work for that company? And you will be surprised at how many people get stumped on that question all the time. So that really goes back into your homework. Did you do your homework on the company, right? So really make sure you know why you want to work for that company, because if you can't ask that question, then why should that company give you an offer, right?
Mm.
A very other common thing, and this kind of goes back to the job hopping, is every employer is going to ask you, why did you go from one employer to the next? And depending on your responses, they're going to be listening to see if any of those issues could be at their company. So you need to be cognizant. Obviously, I say you never want to lie during recruiting, but you want to be careful about your wording, because sometimes it could seem flighty, or it could seem, that you might not be there for a long time. And it might not be a bad thing or anything. You're being truthful and honest. You just have to be careful and make sure you are going into the interview knowing why you left everything. So they're always going to ask you that. Another common question that you're almost always going to be asked is, tell me about yourself, right? And people are always concerned about that. The thing that I always like to say with tell me about yourself is, make sure you're not going off on a tangent about how many siblings you have, where you were born, where you moved to, right? Because that happens all the time, because people get excited and they want to talk about themselves. Make sure that you address it back to the position you're interviewing for. So I'll give you an example, and I'll introduce myself, and let's just say I'm interviewing for my current boutique accounting firm. Hi, my name's Chloe. I'm an OC native. I initially studied accounting at USD, and that's where I initially started my career. During my accounting career, I decided I actually really loved recruiting, and I got to do it at my prior employer, HCBT. I absolutely fell in love with it, but I'm ultimately looking to join Alliance Resource Group because I want to partner with company owners to find the best accounting and finance talent to help grow their businesses. So I'm circling it back to, myself. I give them a little blurb of like kind of who I am, but it's really about driving it home to the company and where you're interviewing.
Right.
And so I think that's where a lot of people kind of miss the mark on the, tell me about yourself question in that circumstance.
Absolutely.
So now keep going forward. You will also be prepared for behavioral interview questions. A lot of employers still do use behavioral interviews. In accounting and finance, not so much, because we're a very technical industry. That being said, it's still widely used. So the biggest issue for behavioral questions is that people get nervous and they don't answer the question. So you can combat that by obviously preparing for going on to Google, finding some, standard behavioral questions, just to kind of write down notes about what I would potentially do in those questions that they potentially throw at me. But most importantly is, once they listen to the question, take a moment, take a breath, and then respond. And traditionally, what, the industry or recruiters, it's really across industries, is the STAR method, right? So situation, task, action, result. So situation, set the scene, give the necessary details so they understand what the problem was. Task, what was your responsibility in that situation? And then action, what did you actually take to address those issues? And then what was the result? And I think where most people have the issue is the result, because a lot of times it will kind of be like a fall off. They didn't actually achieve the end goal. And so you want to make sure that there is an actual deliverable to what the issue was, and make sure try to make it as positive as you can in this situation. Make sure it didn't end in a dead end, or it didn't really go anywhere, because that happens.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I found in my own experience too is that kind of practicing ahead of time has been really helpful, because I have found myself in situations before where I'll start telling that story. And I've been talking for so long, I'm thinking to myself, well, where am I in the story? What was the question? What am I supposed to be responding to? And so I find that for me, practicing ahead of time has been really helpful.
Exactly. And then I do want to talk about this. This is something that I honestly am surprised that I have to even bring up in this situation, but post-COVID, we have seen a big decline in professional decorum, both on the employer side and on the candidate side. And people, I think we were stuck at home for so long. We're all used to being in our sweatpants and, forgot how it was like to be in society. And I've had candidates go to interviews in a t-shirt and jeans, or where they were an athlete. I'll never forget, an HR rep called me and said, this person who I hired was an athlete, and they wore a really tight outfit and they could see their abs through it. It just, it's comical. But things like that, the rule of thumb is you want to dress up one above from whatever the standard is. Obviously, we're in Southern California. A lot of us are in Orange County, San Diego, so we're by the beach. Some companies do flip-flops and jeans. If that's their dress, wear nice jeans and like a nice blouse or a button-up shirt, right? If it's business professional, wear a suit and tie, or if you're a female, wear like a dress suit. So always just try to one up. And if you're not sure, call the day before and say, hey, what's your employee dress code? So just little things like that. On top of it too, with Zoom, there is no room to be late. You're late if a Zoom starts at noon, you're late if you're logging in at noon. You have to log in now by 11:57. Another thing too is a lot of times now, with how competitive the market is, candidates, if they get a job, will cancel like right before an interview. And so that's never a good idea. Not only is it unprofessional, but number two, you're actually hurting yourself in that instance, because you may actually get an offer that's better, whether it's the company culture, comp, benefits. So, the day of an interview, I wouldn't cancel. If you decide you don't want to move forward, do so the day before. So that's my best advice. And then the other thing too is a lot of people don't think they're interviewers anymore. So, which is really surprising. Make sure to send a thank you note immediately after the interview, and it sets you apart. My husband's a accounting executive, and for this current role he sent an email right after the CFO, and the CFO said, this is a lost art. And we've actually had candidates get declined because they don't send thank yous. So make sure you do that, and it will set you apart, because it's actually surprising that most people don't do that anymore.
Absolutely. Are there any questions that you shouldn't ask during an interview?
Good question. So like I mentioned before, you're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. It really is a 50-50 split. That being said, in an interview, you always want to put your best foot forward. So we believe in the philosophy, sell first, buy later. And what I mean by that is make sure that you're performing the best that you can in this interview. So questions not to ask: don't discuss compensation in an interview. Don't discuss benefits. Don't discuss, paid time off. Don't discuss, any other type of benefit, essentially, because a lot of times employers think that you just want to know what you're getting out of it, right? Whereas what can you do for the company? And at the end of the day, it's a mutual benefit, right? But those are things that do turn off employers during the interview process. And let's just say you do get an offer, you for sure want to know every single benefit. You for sure want to know every single piece of that offer letter, but during the interview is just not the time and place for it. So that is one thing I do want to bring up. Now, the other thing, I feel funny even having to say this, but I've had hiring managers tell me candidates bring this up. Don't talk about sex, don't talk about politics, and don't talk about religion in an interview. And in general, we shouldn't be talking about those things in general in the workplace, but it happens. I think especially today, right, in 2024, we've got a presidential campaign coming up. Stay away from it. Stay away from it. You never know. But regardless, I just want to talk about those things in the job or workforce. So, but they do arise.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. So we've gone through the process. We've been looking for our jobs. We've killed the interview, right? And so we're getting the offer. How would you go forth, thinking about putting in your notice, and then letting other companies know that you don't want to move forward?
Yeah, great question. And this is also where it gets kind of tricky and more nuanced, in my opinion, in the recruiting phase. So in order to accept verbally a job offer, you've got to be able to ask two questions of yourself. Can I go into my current employer right now and tell them I'm leaving? The second question you have to ask yourself is, am I ready to tell everybody else who I'm interviewing with that I'm going to pull out of the interview process and that I've already accepted a job offer? If the answer is yes, go ahead and sign that offer letter. If the answer is no, don't do it yet. There's something going on there that is just not a fit for you, and you need to figure out why. Let's just say you do answer yes. I'm really ready and excited. Make sure you sign the executed offer and that the background check, credit check, or drug test or references need to be completed or done before you put in your notice. I have had instances where candidates failed the drug test, or where candidates lied on their resume and they didn't say what they did, or they've got a criminal history that they didn't disclose. In general, it's very few and far in between, but offers have been rescinded. So before you put your employer notice in, make sure that the written letter's executed, and then all your references, background check is completely done. When you go in to talk to your employer about actually formally resigning and putting in your notice, have a list written out of all the reasons why you're moving on. Make sure it's positive. Don't burn a bridge. I've seen that happen. Try to be appreciative and grateful for everything they taught you, and keep it at that. Now during this process, you might get a counter offer. So what's a counter offer? That's when your employer comes back to you and says, we're going to match that offer that the other company gave you, or we're going to exceed it because we want to do everything that we can to keep you. My best advice is don't accept a counter offer, and there's two reasons why. Number one, studies have shown that you will most likely be on the job market again in 6 months because the money just simply threw a Band-Aid on the problem. So why you actually are looking to leave is still going to be present most often. Sometimes people do resolve it, but that is number one. And then number two, you hurt your relationship with your current employer. And so a lot of times, if you were gunning for that promotion and that's why you're looking to leave, they're most likely going to promote the other second in line because they don't trust you to necessarily stay. So there is you have to kind of regain their trust long-term with your current employer. So just something to consider when you're considering a counteroffer, if you do. I think those are the biggest things. But at the end of the day, if you're not ready to pull out of the interview process, just don't accept the offer. I know a lot of people are worried about, what if I don't get anything else? I'm telling you, something else better will come. It just might not be right away, but timing issues arise all the time in the recruitment world.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. We have one more question, I think, and then we'll jump into some of our Q&A. We've had some great questions come through from our viewers. Thank you all for those. And so I know you've talked a little bit about some of the negotiating and going back and forth, right? So what happens when you might have multiple offers on the table and maybe your employer is trying to keep you, right? But maybe those timelines aren't really lining up. What recommendations might you have for that?
Yeah, and this is something I deal with on a daily basis because in my industry, there is a massive shortage, not only in California, but nationwide, of accountants. So most people that I hire have multiple offers at any given time, and it's very rare that they're all lined up. What you need to do in this case is be open and honest with the people that you're interviewing with or you have offers. Let's say in a situation that you have an offer with your the company that's your runner-up, but it's not your first choice. And you're going to be interviewing the following week with your first choice. My recommendation is two things. Number one, call the company that's your number one choice. Let them know they are your number one choice and that you have an offer, but you're really interested in them. Can they move up their timeline to see if you're the right fit for them? Number two, let the company you have an offer with say, hey, I really like you guys. I just need a few more days. Is it possible to give me a few days? Now, the company that gives you the offer, just a forewarning, they could rescind that offer. because if they've got a candidate that they like just as much and they don't want to lose out on, that could happen. So, warning, but in general, you've got to do what's best for you, but you also have to think about the employer in this situation as well. I have seen, or in general in the market, we've seen an uptick in reneges. A renege is when you've fully executed an offer, you accepted and you're about to start, but then, maybe 2 days before your start date, you pull out. And that is there's a multitude of reasons why never to do it. One of which is because you're hurting the company. If they were short a staff member, whoever's picking up the slack is going to have to do so for an even extended period of time because they've got to start the recruitment process all over again. Number two, people who renege are, I don't know what the statistic is, but you're most likely never going to be considered for that company again. So you don't want to burn a bridge. So that's why I'm always very careful about, okay, if you can't accept with them, it's okay, but just let them know. And I promise you something better is going to come around the corner and it's going to be a better fit for you and the company too. So it's never fun. I think in society, we don't like to tell people no, but it's better to be upfront and honest. And, make sure you can do what you can to land that job, but it's never it's always tricky and there's never a right answer, but you just have to I always tell candidates, listen to your gut. What do you want? Don't listen to what everybody else wants. What do you want specifically? So it could be hard to navigate.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's super, super helpful. We've had some great questions come in. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. There have been a couple that have been asked, I think, in a similar manner in slightly different ways. And so I'll go to that one first. Often when you're filling out an application or you're talking to a recruiter or maybe even in the interview itself, you might be asked, what your expectation is for compensation, or maybe they even ask what you're currently getting paid at your current role. How might folks respond to that?
Yeah, that's a great question and something I also ask candidates on a day-to-day basis. So I know there's alumni here who aren't in California, but in California, a recruiter and a company is not legally allowed to ask you what you're making. So that's number one. So now I wouldn't go say, you're not allowed to ask me that, right? But just something that you should know. The flip side of it is, as a recruiter, I know you're never going to take a job that's going to pay you less than your current compensation. So if you volunteer your compensation to me, it's only going to help me get you higher compensation. So I always tell people to be more, I think it's actually, I don't agree with California's stance on saying that it's going to hurt people. I actually think it's doing the opposite. I think you need to be upfront and open about your salary. That being said, as recruiters, we know compensation in general for these different roles we're hiring for. And so, but going back to the question of what are the expectations? At the end of the day, you have to figure out what you will leave a company for. So will it be a 10% increase in salary? Will it be 15? I would say in general, unless it's a promotion to the next, let's just say you've been stuck at this position and you're looking to go to the next level. I wouldn't say you're going to get, more than a maybe 20% increase unless it's a massive promotion to the next level, right? So you do need to be, think about what you need in order to look for a new job. Some companies will offer a significant amount more money than you're currently making just to get you over there. But just so you know, if you get a massive increase from your current employer, once you're actually at that employer, your yearly adjustments are going to be less because they're trying to get you back equal to their current teams, because there's probably an internal inequity issue going on when they do that, which is a whole nother cause. It can cause a whole nother slew of issues. But I think too, you also need to be realistic. So a good example is, I had a candidate the other day where, I know exactly how much she's making because I pull people from this company all the time. It's a Big Four recruiting firm. And she told me her salary, and it's $50,000 more than she's making now. I can't get her a job that she's going to make $50,000 more than she's making now because she's not qualified for it.
Mm.
Right? So be careful when you are giving salary expectations that they're not unrealistic, because you also want to make sure you get considered for that job. Because sometimes employers, if you're too unrealistic with your salary expectations, employers won't even consider you because you're not being competitive with your peers. So that is a concern to have. And the other thing too is when you ask for a salary requirement that it's really high above what or like above market, you have to perform at that level. And so in 21, when we had the great resignation, right, in the recruiting across all industries, we then in 2022 had the great regret by employers because they increased salary folds by so much. And then the people who they hired in those roles weren't performing. So be cognizant of that. But you can also talk to recruiters and say, what do you think I think the better question to ask is, what do you think somebody in my experience should be getting paid by an external recruiter? By the HR internal recruiter, you should ask, well, do you have a salary band that you're looking to spend, or kind of where do you think based off my experience I should fall? That's another good way to flip it on them.
I love that. That's great. How about when an interviewer doesn't leave you time for questions at the end? Is it appropriate to say something, or what does that follow-up look like?
That's another good one, because again, it's a mutual interview. So you should be able to. So if they say, hey, I don't have time, say, I really appreciate you taking your time. I do have some questions. Can we set up a follow-up call, or can I email them to you and see what they say? And if they don't, then you probably shouldn't be continuing the process with them, because you should be able to ask those questions that you need.
Absolutely. Any specific candidate or any advice, I'm sorry, for candidates who might be over 50?
Great question. Unfortunately, I do see ageism all the time. It is a harsh reality of the recruitment world. In terms of being over 50, I would say that make sure you keep up to date with the market for your company. So I think for instance, I'm thinking about, I'll just, my dad's over 50 and he recently got a new job, and he's an expert in his field, very niche field, but he's horrible, for example, at Excel. And I'm not saying everybody over 50 is, by the way. This is just an example of my dad. He needs to work on his Excel skills. So if, for ChatGPT, like, is there AI that you need to learn? Or are there certain things that us Gen Z or millennials are utilizing that are making us more efficient and faster, right? I think the biggest thing is the technology issues, like learning to help with that. But at the end of the day, I think too, it comes down to how you present yourself, your energy level, that I've heard feedback from CEOs about. And I think too, at the end of the day, like, don't try to hide your age. A lot of people do try to hide it. I've gotten a lot of resumes where, I mean, I can figure it out because I see so many resumes on a daily basis where people will hide, they won't put their graduation year, and then they'll have, their career will start in 2000. And I'm like, this doesn't add up. Like, cause I'll go, then if something doesn't add up on the resume, I'll go onto their LinkedIn and then I'll see when they graduated, or like, I can find out very quickly. So my best advice is just be open and honest about it. I will say this for people over 50, be very careful in an interview about bringing up retirement, because I've had candidates who say, I really want a place to be at till I hit retirement. I want this to be my last employer till I hit retirement. And so they think that you're like ready to leave the workforce. So if you do say that, say 20 years, if it's going to be a long time, but if you think you've got 5 to 7 years left in the workforce, don't bring it up. That's not to say that I don't want you to lie, right? But it's more of the perception of hiring managers, because I've had that issue come up.
That's really good advice.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chloe. We have another question. This might be our last. So this person says, I have a relatively high position within the industry I'm in, but I want to do a career change. I've been looking for lower positions than where I'm currently at, but they all pay more than I currently make. Is this the correct strategy, or do you have any advice for how that career or industry change may take place?
So first and foremost, it's good that you're willing to take a salary hit in order to change industries, because that is the biggest thing. For instance, some accounting professionals want to pivot to finance, or finance wants to pivot to accounting, and it's not as easy as you would think because they are somewhat related, right? The biggest advice I would have for you in this instance, and I'm not sure which industries you're trying to cross or if they're even commingled at all, but go onto LinkedIn and start doing research about the position, the people that are in those positions that you're interested in. What background do they have? What experience did they have to get there? And also reach out to them. If there are USD alumni in the area who are doing those positions, feel free to reach out. I can tell you, I've gotten so much business from USD alumni, and it's so easy to start a conversation because we already have that rapport. But more importantly, don't be afraid to reach out to people in the industry, because they're the ones who can help you pivot. In general, I will say this: if you're trying to do a complete career pivot, a recruiter like myself is not going to be the resource for you, because I get paid a fee to find people with a very skilled set. And so if, they won't pay me to find a tax person to do a finance job, right? I get paid to find finance people. So that's the one caveat I would tell you, is a recruiter may not be able to help you. However, if you find a really great recruiter for that industry you're targeting, you can say, hey, I'm looking to pivot to this industry. Can you help me figure out what I could do? Because a good recruiter is also a good career coach. I'm going to tell you whether or not this next job is going to get you to the next level, because that's what our job is. We have to know the career progression within our industries.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I think we have hit the end of our time. I'm so sorry to those who submitted questions that we weren't able to get to or answer for you. But I want to thank our Orange County Torero Club, Vicki and Steve Nasman, and specifically our guest, Chloe Bachner. Chloe, thank you so much for all of your insights and for helping us on this journey and providing valuable thoughts and ideas for folks who might be trying to score that next job. We hope to see the rest of you at a future webcast, at an event, or here on campus sometime in the near future. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.